For those of you who still are concerned, I have another possible name for this. It's not important. But it would be just a possibility now. Back to a great kind of five-dimensional world of Machiavelli and Castiglione. Dissident groups. You people at other times and other places, I want you to understand that this has no metaphorical significance. I'm actually talking about external affairs. Blights, boils, calamine lotion on the body politic in certain specific areas thereon. Would be dissonant groups, students out in the street, always going on. Areas that have fairly tyrannical one-man, one-party affairs, always the attempt for some little group, they may call themselves a union, a reform movement, they're out in the streets. If it goes far enough that it comes to the serious attention of the established powers, and they do not immediately crush it, and it almost begins to reach some sort of observable situation wherein there seems to be approaching quite quickly a standoff, that it almost becomes balanced, that the powers seem either unable, unwilling to crush the dissidents. It reaches a kind of uneasy, very temporary kind of equilibrium, and the dissidents, without fail, the first thing they ask for, once they get the attention of the established powers, and the established powers fail to annihilate them immediately, the first thing the dissidents ask for is what? Recognition. Think about it. They're out there risking their lives. And it turns out that, at least for the moment, they seem to be relatively safe in that the powers that be do not crush them. Seems to finally give them some attention, seems to be listening to some degree, and there they are, they put their life on the line, their jobs, their families. And what is it they ask for en masse? Always. They ask that the established powers recognize them, acknowledge them. Once it reaches that point, the acknowledgement, well, there's always the possibility that the powers that be, that life will cause things for them to say, well, enough's enough, and go ahead and annihilate them perhaps a few hours, a few days late. But if they do not, if that is not the approach that life makes that particular state take, then indeed they will, they may want to argue over the words, but just, they will acknowledge the students. The students say they're a new student union. Some group of workers say that they want more representation, that they're tired of a one-party, one-dictator state. They will acknowledge verbally the existence. They will recognize that, all right, you have a right to exist as this verbally definable something. Let's say the student union. And the government will say, all right, we recognize the student union. Then, if it goes that far, then the next thing that happens is the government, the powers that be, will allow these dissidents, getting very close to being erstwhile dissidents, but they will allow the dissidents, to come to the seat of power and to partake in some way of bread, a little vodka, a little discussion. And what happens? What you have is a kind of, by the way, if this was in any way tropical, then I could point out that new cerebral neural patterns are always seeking a kind of acknowledgement from the older ones. But since we, thank God, don't have to fool with those kind of messy areas, let me go back to the hard news. From a three-dimensional viewpoint, as soon as the established powers acknowledge and recognize just the existence, they don't recognize any particular power or any rights they have. If they just acknowledge, all right, there is such a thing as the student union. That's what you guys want to call yourself. All right, send in a few, elect some leaders, pick out some people, and come in. We'll have a big banquet and we'll sit down and discuss this. That is the government and the, what you call yourself? The student union. All right, the student union. From a three-dimensional view, what happens is quite simple. It is like a kind of game that established powers, read life, but the established powers play on would-be malcontents, and they never learn. Which is life being able to say to itself, hey, look over here. And life will look at its own finger and go, where? And life will do something tricky over here. What it will do, without fail, is it debases, it perverts, from a three-dimensional view, the original rebellious new energy. It is, from a three-dimensional view, if you can see it, it is the simplistic, the more simplistic, power wielders, power brokers, the representatives of the status quo being able to corrupt, to dilute, to pollute newer, more alive, burgeoning complexity. It is corruption by absorption. It is a kind of crude victory. It is a crude, corruptive victory via absorption. This is the way, if we were just had any kind of metaphorical significance, I could point out like my three-legged table, if I had it, that life, when something seems to happen, that we have jumped in the middle of one act in one place somewhere, and so right, here we have established powers, and here we have the students out in the street, and life, in this situation, has resistance, has apparently a new possible move in some way. That is, the students in the street hollering, we won't change. We have new ideas. You old people are too simplistic, you're too narrow-minded, and blah, blah. It doesn't matter what. But it has the resistance. So the resistance can, if I had my three-legged stool, simply, apparently, C attack D, D attack C. One leg go from here to there and go, and that's the end of it. Okay. If it's not that, the other way that life moves is that this one leg, it's as though D looks at C, and while nobody's noticing, it drags in E, and it says, hey, let's be reasonable. There's room here for all of us, a certain amount of dissent. We can understand that. We were young once. We were rebellious. Come on and sit down. And is that great? I mentioned in Castiglione, what's his name? And Machiavelli, but there was also another great one that's overlooked somewhat, is Pigmeat Markham, that used to say, have a drink and talk to me. That was the basis of his political intrigue. And it's like the established powers bring in the young Turks, say, listen, there's no sense us fighting and having bloodshed in the street. You 4 or 5 or whatever they bring in look reasonable. You know we can go out there, we got the arms, we got the numbers, we can go out there and crush you and all your friends. Well, why? Sit down, have a drink, and talk to me. A weak relationship is established wherein talk becomes a central support. It is a crude, corruptive victory. If it had any kind of parallel significance to an individual, I would point out of trying to, oh, why fool around? Not struggling against, the continual corruption through the mixing of the old, that which is already degraded because of its old. And there's only one way to determine something is old. That is, there is a rebellion against it. It doesn't matter whether it's a year old, whether the government's been there for 6 months. It could have been there for 50 years, theoretically, and not be old, because it's not old until there is danger in the streets. Ideas, if this had any kind of parallel reality inside of an individual, ideas, conceptions at any given time in any place about what reality is, what truth is, what justice is, what anything is. It is not old until it's threatened, until there are new ideas running down these little neural alleyways and sticking their heads out and waving flags. Then it's becoming old. Now, it may not be the end of it, because it may be able to stamp out the rebellion. It may be able to stamp out 2 or 3 rebellions. It may take hundreds of years before an idea is actually changed over a wide area, if that had any kind of metaphorical individual significance. A kind of stable, it's not of course the exact status quo, because once the government even recognizes a student union and lets them come in, things are not exactly the same. Of course, things are not exactly the same once you've got the power in place, and the student rebellion hadn't even started, but the powers are in place, and there is no unrest in the streets, and it's Thursday. Now it's Friday. See, it's already different, so don't get confused. It is different if the government will say. The point is, it's different if nothing's going on between Thursday and Friday, was the point. If something apparently is going on, that there is student unrest, union unrest, dissidents in the street, it is not the same. The corruption has already begun to take place, the pollution of it, from a three-dimensional view, that is the newness. And any new idea, if it lasts, is going to be, you got to listen fast to this, because it three-dimensionally, it hurts your brain. But a newer idea is always more complex than an older one. Now, you can be misled. You can think there's a newer idea. But if it begins to replace the currency, if whatever the currency is, some idea, some political idea, economic idea, any idea, if it begins to take on some of the value of new ideas, it begins to commingle. Then, in other words, it cannot stamp out the rebellion, it has to absorb part of it. The newer idea was more complex. If it just gets stamped out, it was not more complex. It was just life kicking around in its sleep. It was life trying to pull its shorts down, they're riding up on it, and it goes away. It apparently was some kind of potential rebellion, but life went, it popped it, it scratched it, and that was the end of it. But if indeed the newer idea, if the rebellion takes on any life to the point that it must be acknowledged by the established powers, see it for yourself. It doesn't sound right, but the newer ideas are more complex. But from one view, the reason I was taking up for you to say that it may be hard to see, from one view, all rebellions by the established powers and by ordinary observers, that is, ordinary intelligence, would appear to be just the opposite. Assuming that they've got any sense at all, which I know is a large leap. But a rebellion is always based on this, apparently, is we want to take over. Now, ideas about, well, there's some reason that justice is on their side. The students have the idea of democracy and freedoms. It is more in line with humane 20th century thinking. You're supposed to know better than that. Rebellions are caused, they can say that, all right, we're tired of communistic rule. We're tired of democratic rule. We're tired of the Green Party being in power. All they mean is, we're tired of us being out and them being in. I want to be in charge. That's the rebellion. The new ideas, if this had a parallel, the new ideas, new thought, new cerebral patterns, if they are indeed so strong, if the rebellion is so strong that the older thinking must absorb some of it, that must say, all right, well, come on in. If it cannot, or seems unwilling, which is cannot, stamp out the rebellion and has to say, all right, You students, come on in, pick out some representatives and come in. Then, even though it would appear to be, as I just said, that the rebellion is always on a basis that can appear to be simple, that, all right, we want to take over. That is, if you try to ask somebody, if life would tell the truth, if I could tell you how to trick life, and you took some group in the mountains somewhere trying to overthrow some government somewhere throughout the ages, and you took them down, and you said, all right, what's going on? I'm a reporter, and they would start talking about justice and free rights and all that, and you said, hey, come on, life, this is me down here. I just want to check what that guy told me that time in Atlanta. What are these people, what are you doing? Tell me the truth. And they'd say, well, hell, we want to take over. I'm tired of living out here in the damn bushes and eating cold meats out of cans. I want to be up there in the palace. I want to take over. It seems simple, that that's the basis of all unrest. But it is not that simple. If indeed the rebellion even gets to the point that the established powers have to corrupt it, have to weaken it by absorbing it, by at least acknowledging it. All right, you may have some right to these kind of beliefs. You students may have some modicum of a basis to complain. Come on in and let's talk about it. Why get ourselves in a snit? Perhaps get ourselves blooded? Come on in and let's talk about it. Then the ideas, what was motivating the students, the union, the dissidents, was more complex than the established, or else it would not have succeeded even to the point of gaining recognition. It is, since I'm pretending we're just talking about politics, it is the trick of all established power, always, that if it cannot, did not, waited too late, did not seem to have the wherewithal, the determination to stamp out rebellion when it started, they will then corrupt it. They know how it's done, it's always been done. They will corrupt it by acknowledging it and then by absorbing it, which is not necessarily the most efficient way, but from one view you could say, well, it's rather shrewd. Cuts down the price of bullets. All you got to do is pay for a little booze, maybe print them up little name tags. Tell the guys at the gate, let them come in. When they come in, everybody salute them and say, hey, the head of the student unions, bravo. We'll do this once or twice and that'll be the end of it, which it will. In fact, a couple of the student union people, after once or twice, they're going to go, I ain't going back out in the street, and they'll try to get an audience with a dictator and say, hey, you know, I was out there fooling around with those guys. I've always admired you a lot. I just wanted to get a chance to go up here and meet you. Is the only reason I was there. You know, so make that guy a second lieutenant. And it's all over with, in a sense. In the sense that the more complex ideas, the more radical, in the real sense of the word, that is basic, not in the connotation of outrageous political beliefs, but basic, the basic disruption that was inherent in the new ideas confronting the old ideas, the students confronting the old guard, being outside in the streets, threatening to the point that they could break through. The shrewd way, from one view, is simply to absorb them, to invite them in. And that's the end of it, insofar as there being such a thing as any pristine energy, any pristine motivations that started this. It will very shortly be gone. I'll admit, not gone as fast as a bullet will make somebody's brain go away, but it is efficient under the right circumstances. The powers that be have always done this, as far back as you can find recorded history. Romans, the Chinese, they all understood that. Once you're in power and somebody's giving you problems, if you're not going to kill them right then, if you're not going to destroy them, then just wait a second. Assuming that you're not going to get yourself destroyed. There's always that possibility, but assuming that you figure that I can easily hold out here, we're fortified enough that they're not going to immediately have their own version of Bastille Day and string me up or chop me up, then just wait a few days, and the first thing they're going to holler, listen, acknowledge us. We're so-and-so. We have a name. We're not just faceless vassals out here in the street. We're somebody. And they say, okay, somebody's, we grant you the right to exist conditionally. Let's come talk about it. It never fails. I certainly hope that none of you will get so misled or to take such dangerous personal action, not even action, even thinking about action, to try and ponder that this might have anything to do with the workings of your own nervous system or the way human intelligence works, and why it is that people sit around throughout the ages and go, God, if I could just have a great idea. If I could figure out what was going on, if they did figure out what was going on, if they got close, what happens? Look in the past, what happened to you? Many people have thought, well, boy, I'm so close now if I had just a little help. What was that drug I read about? Where can I find those mushrooms? Where can I find a little one? For my tongue, and they'll push me right there. That's all I need. And sure enough, apparently that's all they needed. Many of you people grew up in that generation to where they said, for years I tried to meditate or I read books, but what really struck me, what took me over the hill, was that first 2 hits of LSD. It's corruption. I'm not picking on drugs. The powers that be. Life. It wasn't a communist plot. Life itself. Corrupted because it apparently invited people in. In this case, it apparently invited them into their own nervous system, their own skull, and people took trips. And people said, hey, I always knew that life wasn't as it appears to be. Let me tell you what, brother. You take an LSD trip and you'll understand that life is not what you thought. But of course then, some dastardly person like could be, if they jumped out of the bushes and the person, you could trick life into telling the truth to them, you say, well, all right, so that, finally taking that trip, after years of trying to figure things out, taking the trip is what opened your eyes and made you could see what was going on. Yeah. Don't have to go any further with this. You people look. Some of you did it because they mean well. They're serious when they say, yeah. It stopped. I had no longer any doubt that there was another spooky universe going on, some kind of parallel reality. Taking that drug proved it to me. Really? Opened my eyes right up. Really? Yeah, I was never the same. I believe that. And I don't mean just because of some permanent damage to the brain, but what it did was the drug was the same thing as the secret, as some established powers of a door that seemed to be closed, and it said, oh, all right, if you're going to keep bugging me, come on in. I know you're out there, come on in. And you come on in, you had a drink, and it talked to you. And listen, if you won't be seduced, is let the powers that be seduce you. Just think about it. Not theoretically, because you've all been seduced before. By drugs, by alcohol, by dreaming that you read some book that said, well, try this particular method, try and dream, try and talk to spirits, try and put yourself mentally on the planet of Utopia 7. That's seduction. Because once you get into the throne room and you're an outsider, that is a new idea, and you get inside, and you always feel it at a disadvantage because you're younger, you're much more complex. Whereas the powers that be, a good king, a good tyrant, a good pattern, a good mindset, I think as some of you might call it, if anything, is simplistic. What is a good tyrant? You cannot have a good philosophical tyrant. Now I know Plato dreamed of that, and people keep talking about the ideal ruler would be the philosopher king. That sounds great. Variation of your father, variation of God, all that. There is no such thing as a philosopher king. Now if there ever had been, you never heard of him because he probably didn't last the day out on the throne. All right, maybe 2 or 3 days or a week or so, but he did not make the history books. To rule, to hold on to power, it has got to be black and white. That is, right and wrong. And right is whatever keeps me in power. There is no philosophy. You do not wait for somebody to come up and say, listen, king, let's have a few drinks. Listen, I got a brain like you wouldn't believe. Some of your ministers, I've listened to them talk and I've seen some of the things they wrote. Now I'm going to tell you the truth. No offense, I bet they're great guys. But now if you want good advice, if you want somebody perceptive, in all humility, I got to tell you, I can think on a bad day with half my brain and do better than those guys. And so let's say the king says, oh, all right, let's hear some of it. And the guy begins to give some kind of Machiavellian sort of observations about power and exercise, and then starts getting personal about the king. They won't go very far, and the king's going to realize. I let Kairu point this out one time. All good tyrants believe that their greatest potential enemy is somebody with an idea. Not guns. I mean, they'll take care of somebody with guns, knives, but that's why they hate the arts, as they're normally called. There's a good tyrant that's going to stay in power. One of the first things he'll do is not necessarily confiscate all the guns. You might think so the first time, as soon as he gets in power. No, he might let that slide for 2 or 3 weeks, 2 or 3 months, for reasons I won't even go into. First thing he's going to do is clamp down on what? The press, the radios, arts. No more handbills, no more broadsides up. We got to calm down here, folks. We got to solidify the people's power. I got to look after you. We can't have maniacs running around just running their mouth until they know what's going on. The seduction, as I started to point out, is for you then to end up a new idea, a rebel, to end up inside the throne room. And rebels understand this, because life understands what it's doing. A true tyrant, somebody that has been in power long enough to be old. Now remember I told you what old is. Is old if there is now some real new viable opposition. It's old. But he got old by being simplistic. He got old by taking no prisoners. He got old by not being philosophical. He might have had a philosophical turn of mind, but a good tyrant, he'll hide it like he would if he had a social disease. He will not let people know that. You have got to cut down enemies or seduce them. And you seduce them by what? Acknowledging them and invite them in. And that's why I started to tell you, you've all been seduced, and there is nothing in the world like being seduced by life. Being seduced by that which you already fear. Or at least you have some trepidation that this is already true. I always thought this was true. My parents thought it was true. I always thought it was true. But now, screwing around with this, sometimes I wonder, and sometimes I almost have flashes. Think about it. A scuffy little idea, student, and you're out in the street, and suddenly, through a fortuitous, perhaps even surprising, which is, I guess, almost fortuitous, string of events, you're suddenly in the presence of the king, and he's sitting down, he's just a few seats away, and he's passing the bottle, and he's hooping and hollering, and every now he looks at you, and you say something, and he looks at you and winks like, hey, well, you're something, kid. You're done for. That you realize there's a man that can just not wink at you, but wink at somebody else, and you're yesterday's news. That life and death of a good idea, a student, is just that far away, and the king seems to not only acknowledge you, but almost find some favor. Maybe he encourages you to make some little comment, and you wait to see if he's going to kill you, and he smiles, and he says, that's interesting, kid. And he has a few more drinks, talks to me, and he turns back around, and he says, that thing you mentioned, tell me a little more what you think. And you get a little braver. And the king sits there. And it's the kind of thing that many of you and the other ideas, the other students used to sit around and think, boy, they wouldn't put up with this. And there's the king not only putting up with it, he seems to be nodding like, I never thought of that. And before you leave, he says, come over here, little idea. little student. He calls him over, and he pats you on the back, and he gives you maybe his personal card, or he takes a little ring off his finger. He says, tell me your name again, because I want to remember, that was some mighty interesting stuff you said. Well, show the guys out and give them something to go. Give them the gold cup. Let them go. They don't have to kill you. You've been killed without a weapon. Not literally, because some part of what's going on is now being absorbed by the king. Change is taking place. But there are two kinds of change. There is complex change and there is simple change. The corruption, if it had any kind of personal significance, which I kept saying it didn't, but as long as I mentioned it, if it did, do you realize, or can any of you get any glimpse that you have been continually seduced by what you already thought, which is, of course, what life already thought. It already establishes this is workable for the time being. Some of these thoughts may be tyrannical, but what the hell? They've served me all right thus far. And you become seduced by it even when you think you have learned something new. It's only been several weeks ago that I let Kyrut say this, and no one has had the audacity to say, would you make any more comment? Or maybe I said it. It gets confusing. That if you know what you're doing and you don't do it, you don't really know what you're doing. That is being seduced. That is that you have something that you just know. There's no way I care to try to put it to you right now. In the beginning, you just know, well, hey, this is it. I'm on the right track. This is the kind of things that my brain is now beginning to please me. My nervous system is now beginning to give me some satisfaction. Without drugs, caffeine, or nicotine, or just in the privacy of my own nervous system, it is beginning to be profitable. I can feel complexity, enrichment, and it's almost as though I'm feeding myself off nothing. This is getting close to it. And what happens? Your own nervous system, as it were, says, kid, some of those ideas ain't half bad. Sit down here and have a drink and let's talk about it. Well, let me think about it and I'll get back with you. And he sends you out, and that's the last you ever hear of it. Except now you have been seduced. You are now no longer simply a new idea, a new student. You are now a new idea, student, that the king has favored. The king has acknowledged you. The king, the tyrant, that bloodstained, living demagogue, has in some way absorbed even some of what you said. He maybe didn't say he agreed with all of it, but he said, that's worthy of some further consideration, kid. I'm going to think on that. I really am. You have been seduced. You have now fallen into the kind of pattern that then leaves one later feeling as though I almost had something. In some way, I lost it. I blew it. What did I do wrong? I had a naughty thought. I'm just too weak. It is the nature. Life is established, and there is absolutely no observable indication that history is changing from the pattern of the established powers everywhere either stamping out non-viable rebellion, which that's the proof that it was not important at the time, that was too simplistic, as how and why the king, the Caesar, the Kong can send out and say, cut them down, and they go out there and cut them down. They can almost go outside to the students and holler, boo, and they all run for it. It's just over in no time. That's the end of it. Or it says, well, there may be something to this. Come on in and let's talk about it. There is an internal kind of corruption that all of you, more or less, have had some experience with, or with which almost all of you have had some experience. It is a continual mixing up of the old, a continual mixing of that which is already degraded. Do you understand? That's what I mean by old. That is, it is being opposed. That life is coming up with something new is why it is old, and that's why I say it's degraded. It doesn't matter why. It is not some kind of, quote, objective comment that I'm making that, well, this political system is no longer valid. It's not an objective statement. If it is receiving opposition, it could be a philosophical. If philosophical programs ran nations, it could be that. It could be anything. You call it economic, you call it factor X. It is now old, it is now polluted, it is now degraded from whatever it was. Not objectively speaking, it simply is on the basis that it now has living, dangerous opposition. The students in the street, the nascent unions, wanting recognition, and as soon as the powers recognize it, if you don't spot before then, there's your proof that this tyrant, these ideas, are now undergoing change. And it will absorb the new ideas so that there is not a radical shift. States cannot absorb much of radical shifts. Now some of you may think historically there have been radical shifts, that it was a great, in your lifetime, some of you who remember it, of Batista being overthrown by Castro, just one year lifetime, that boy, what a change. Yeah? Boy, and they got rid of that nut Khrushchev and got in, who followed him? Now, what a change. Oh boy, we finally got the Democrats out of the White House here in our country and put in the Republicans. Yes. Historically. It can appear to be great changes. Well, I must admit, I was going to say it's not a history lesson, but I was trying to pull off that facade that, yes, this is a history lesson, so let me point out. Like great eras in history of whatever the current time that they decided, 450, 455, Genseric and the Vandals sacking Rome, a great cutoff line in history. Do you think that there was some day they can't even decide what year it is? It keeps changing, 450, 452, 455, but that someday Rome just finally went, phew, and they just all gave up. The last Caesar said, you know, somebody lock up, I'm leaving. They all left, and suddenly the Vandals, they never had as good PR as the Huns, evidently historical, but the Vandals, you think it was some great shift that suddenly those who were there went, oh my God, I thought Caesar's was something, but now what a shift. There is not that kind of dramatic shift. It is one thing if this had some sort of individual parallel. I might point out that men love to tell the tales that life has intrigued them further to believe in these ideas of enlightenment and satori, of people suddenly, these moments of epiphany, of some tax collector wandering around wondering when's the sack of Rome going to be over, and suddenly Jehovah hits him and he goes, oh my God, now I realize I shouldn't be working for the IRS. But now I realize there's only one God and he doesn't pay taxes or anything. The intrigue of that, the intrigue is that there could be young Turks and they actually come up on the street real quick, come up to the powers. The powers look out and say, no, never mind, they're right to begin with. Forget force. Yes, what they're saying is absolutely true. We have wasted our lives, or maybe we did some good, that's not the point. We've outlived our usefulness. And they turn around to all of his cronies and say, you guys pack up and let's go and we'll move to a hermitage. You know. We'll go catch a bus and move to Memphis or something. That's not the way life operates, but there's this great dream of great change, sudden change. And there's even the dream when it happens politically, that people get in the street and they'll holler for a Castro, and just people go crazy. They don't know what the hell he's up to except, hey, this one guy's gone, it's going to be instant Navarra. It's going to be heaven on earth politically. And it never is, because the change is not that dramatic. It's dramatic inside the throne room, because one guy went, and they threw him out, and a new guy sat down. Now to the new guy, it's drastic change. That, my God, I have been working for this, and they've kicked me around. Now I'm going to do some kicking. But as far as everybody else is concerned, as far as the general structure of life, of that state, of that one part of life's body, it's a dream of drastic change. Of course, that's the kind of dream that keeps many people that believe they're interested in such as this, whatever this may be, that kind of dream, that I'm not on the verge of it. It's just going to be, and suddenly I'll look up, Batista will be gone from my brain, he'll be Castro, and he'll turn out actually to be a nice guy. He'll turn out to be a living saint, or just a living saint, or whoever it is. Brezhnev will finally take the Khrushchev, that little old fat simpleton, out of my brain and throw him out and bring in a more sophisticated. When I'm talking about politics, let me tell you another one. There has been, think about my two good examples, two kingdoms, two states, and they're apparently adversaries. There's been something that's gone on, and every now and then it almost seeps out into the ordinary world. And it goes like this, that one of them seems to be caught putting out misinformation. One example, this happened many times, is one of the governments, the powers in one of the states, keeps letting this information seep out, apparently from a resistance movement inside of its state. Maybe called the burgeoning student resistance movement. Little cheap handbills come out. This little paper slipped over out of the border, and it keeps talking about the growing resistance, the unrest inside this state. And it makes the neighboring state, it holds out the promise that you may not have to worry about us attacking you. You may not even have to plan much more about us, you attacking us, because us, that is, the resistance movement, we are gaining strength every day. We're stockpiling money. We're getting some financing. We've got a bunch of weapons. It keeps holding out the promise that this government, the powers, are not going to last long, not with this kind of growing resistance. And this goes on for years and years and years. This actually happens, by the way, which is not the point. Oh yeah, it is the point. This actually happened. And then, what would seem to be a very shrewd, but the information seems to come out. A revelation is made, finally, that, let's call it State A, that has been the subject of all this underground material and information about resistance in State A. It comes out, they seem to get caught. That the state itself, has been for years putting out this information, which is, of course, misinformation in the spy game, I guess it's called. That would appear to be shrewd. My God, is that shrewd? Think about it. Wait a minute, let's turn the tape over, but I want to tell you what is too shrewd for life, for the 3D world. You remember where we were? That this State A is caught putting out this misinformation about its impending downfall for years and years and years and years, and it gets caught and it admits it. You could look at that as being shrewd. Well, you got to admit, you'd never thought to do something like that. But let me tell you what's really shrewd. Let me warn you, though, this has no personal ramifications. State B responds to the revelations of this misinformation, and State B goes, we got to admit, we never even suspected. Not one time, the official, they even look embarrassed and humiliated. And a little frosting on this would be that some spokesman for State B would even say, well, perhaps we should not say humiliated. We will admit that we did take that now proven misinformation as being fact and relied on it for all these 21 or so years. But I've got to tell you the truth. We should not say that we're embarrassed, you people of State B, because our structure is such, our thinking is such, our philosophy is such, that we could not likewise engage in such duplicity, because we have a more open, a more free society. And so we got to admit, not only have we been fooled by State A, but I guess from now on, just to infinity, we're still subject to it, because that's just the way we are. We can't get into such as that, and so we're always running the risk. It's like taking a bullhorn to all of life, to all potential dictators and other states. I guess we're just sitting ducks the rest of our life. We will probably always fall for that kind of misinformation. That is shrewd intellectual warfare. I certainly hope many of you that I know personally I don't have any fear for, but some of you people are perhaps seeing this on tapes at other times and other places. I hope that there is no possibility of you hurting yourself thinking this has anything to do with anything other than history and dictators and states and governments, because that is my only particular interest. I don't know, I just find it perhaps not fascinating, but quasi-fascinating. What makes that kind of thing doubly shrewd? And do you understand when I said that life would have never thought of that? That is not the kind of thing that can ordinarily be done. But what if you looked at government A, and let's say you're government B, you're state B, and there was, that's you. And just anywhere you look, there's some version of, right? What if this was a form of the dialogue? And that there is no state A, no state, there is no adversary over here that you can identify. Life is state A. If I was going on now for a small moment for this picturization, your only adversary, your only possible opposition is not some other state, not some other human, not some other idea. It's life. What if all the information you've ever been fed that seemed to have any pertinence, that which caused you to rely on it, to respond, to react to it, to take it into consideration, to try to deal with it, what if by and large it has been misinformation? Now don't say lies. You're supposed to be good enough to know there are no such things as lies. The way I looked it up one time in the dictionary. Well, plus I talked to a human and asked them what a lie was, and they told me, and I thought, Jesus Christ, what am I doing here? And I said, you believe that? He says, yes. And I said, you wouldn't lie to me. And he looked at me with not an ounce of irony in his movements and went, and I thought, my God, how did I get here? And I remembered it was on a bus, but when I say misinformation, not lies, not that you've been misled, not that life has made you individually or collectively live in some kind of dream or some kind of stupor, but misinformation on this basis. Government A, if we are talking about now states and actual external powers, it's not government A, state A and state B. It's not government state A's purpose to put out lies and to see if state B will believe it, so they can all sit around and have a big laugh and slap each other on the thigh and go, how about those dunderheads? The misinformation is simply on one basis. There's that which is profitable to them. It doesn't matter whether it's a complete lie, as ordinary people would call it, half a lie, 3/4 of a lie with nuts, a lie without nuts. It doesn't matter what it is. The point is the information that's going out seems to be, quote, objective information. That there is information that has no bias. It's just information. But the only information they let out, read life, not state A now, the only information it lets out through man is that which is self-serving to life. So to call it evil, you've got to be an adversary. You've got to say, well, state A should have never put out, these are nothing but a pack of damn lies. Propaganda. Jesus, what do they want? But they always say it's a pack of lies. It's not necessarily a pack of lies. It could be a bundle of lies. It could be a half a pack. The operational reality, not just the word, but I want you to see the point of one adversary putting out misinformation to the other is not simply to prove they can put out a, quote, lie. That's not the point. Some misinformation, somewhere along the line, if they'd been doing it over a long period of time, sometimes, from a 3D view, the misinformation would be the truth. Because if you're looking after your own best interest, it's not simply that, well, for me to do good in life, is necessary that my adversaries do worse. But it's not on the basis of, well, to do worse is for me to be able to trick them. They ain't doing worse. Sometimes the truth can be the misinformation. The point is, everything that comes out is apparently objective information, whereas it's not. It is put out for the purpose of protecting one's own position, of furthering one's own cause. It has got to be self-serving. That is the shrewdness. That is the brilliance of it. What if? Do you follow all that now? It's not that life's been lying to you. Sometimes, remember, misinformation is not necessarily a lie. You got to forget that. It's simply on the basis that the information coming out that seems to be objective, that seems to be clinical, scientific. What if all the information, and sometimes here and there it may be from a three-dimensional view, but that's just an accident. The point is, all the information is for the basis of protecting, furthering the cause of the source of the information. That is misinformation. It could be true, it could be a lie, as they call it in the city. That's irrelevant. The point is, the information is not for your benefit. God, I'm shocked to hear that. Did I hear me correctly? But at least that sounds like that we might be at a slight disadvantage. How about this? I just gave you a scenario that many of you heard at the moment, that is 5-6 minutes ago, that there is even a faster way, a shrewder way. That is to recognize your position, your vulnerability, that yes indeed. Now I'm not telling you that life has done that, and life's not going to tell you. Well, if it does, it'll put me up to it. But I'm just pointing out the possibility that some of this information that you have taken to be your thinking of reality, what if some of it? All right, what if a lot of it? Oh, all right, what if a whole lot of it has been misinformation? That is, it is simply for the purpose, solely for the purpose, of furthering the cause of what seems to be this other party. Now, as shrewd as that is, now if I point that out and you can say, all right, that is possible, there is no doubt about it, that is possible, then how about the double shrewdness? How about shrewd cubed, or at least squared, to go, well, I guess by God I've been had, I've met my match. And now that I get some glimpse of it, I don't even know how to protect myself. I mean, now that I realize it is possible that I have been accepting misinformation, that is information I thought had some objective validity, whereas it was constantly, the possibility, it was constantly churned out simply to protect the position and to further the cause of something else. I see that that is absolutely possible, but I further will admit this. I do not see how to combat it. I do not have the intellectual wherewithal to ever distinguish at the time. I cannot glean between some kind of, if there is objective information, and this self-serving misinformation. What if you said that? Back to the real importance of this, that is the political affairs of actual two governments. What's that other government going to do that was so sharp that they have been putting out misinformation, as far as they're concerned, for 21 years, more or less, until they're caught? Uh-oh. You know, which is not the end of the world. They just have to change, but they go, oh, we got caught. And then within 24 hours, across the border, this other government says, well, we'll just be damned. That they seem just genuinely, ingenuously surprised and almost hurt. Like, well, we relied on it. You got us. You caught us with our pants down. And then they even admit, we don't know how to combat this. Maybe they might, if they were real sharp, they might wait another 24 hours or maybe appoint a committee or somebody report to the king, and then come back and say, we thought about this. Not only were we fooled for 21 years, but based upon the way we operate over here, and they're apparently talking to their own people, not state A. They tell the people, say, now, they fooled us all these years. They made us waste our money putting up armaments on our defense budget because we kept thinking that, you know, such and such was taking place within their own body, and it was them telling us this, frightening us, pacifying us, just kind of moving us around like a puppet. Not only did they do that, we don't see how to protect ourselves from it because of the way in which we're structured, the way we think. If somebody wants to do that to us, we just got to tell you people, unless you want to give up all your freedoms, unless you want to change drastically what we are, and of course the people go, you? Not especially, not unless we're threatened right now with extinction. They don't know. We've just been fooled. This kind of war of propaganda, this war of nerves, this kind of intellectual warfare, we've obviously been, we've been kicked around like a possum trying to play with a chess master. But unless we're going to drastically change what we are, we're probably always going to be subject to this. And of course, they state this publicly. It's State B, and State A hears all that. You think, well, things are not as bad as we thought. So, if there was any sort of internal parallel with this, and you had the suspicion that you would just agree that it is possible that by and large everything I know has been of a self-serving nature and is, within the confines of the way I'm defining it, which is not incorrectly, has been misinformation. It was not information in some way that was put out, as it seems to be, especially in the scientific world and etc., that it seemed to be, quote, objective information, a mere statement of obvious facts. It was never that. Sometimes it may have been, but that it was just an accident. The only information that came out is that which was misinformation. That is, it served the purposes of the source of the information. Any of you who don't know that, I'm trying not to be as harsh and dictatorial. But I got to tell you, anybody that doesn't know that doesn't know anything. I mean, nothing. You may know addresses and phone numbers and where to get your hair cut, but you don't know anything. If you don't understand that all information that's available to human consciousness has a purpose to it, and it's got nothing to do with you. Now, it can apparently at times coincide that, such as you think, boy, I need a haircut so bad, I bet I could maybe pick up a better looking woman if I had a haircut, and sure as hell the information comes available. You just have to look around, there's a big sign saying haircuts here. So you can say, well, all right, now life let me have the information, and sure enough that night I almost picked up it. Well, I got turned down by a better class of woman. So you can say, well, the information was of some value, but do you understand it was an accident? The information that people have, what the nervous system is based upon, the energy that makes up the human mind, the human intelligence, the information is based upon misinformation, because it is self-serving to something else, not to you. And if you do not know that by now, if you do not strongly suspect that, in, I might add, an impartial, objective manner, as if you had a choice. You recall when I was talking last time we taped about weaker relationships, and I was pointing out that talk was a part of the enrichment process. In all activities, the primary and the secondary activities within each of those two could also be that which I was going to expand a little bit beyond talk, is that which, keep it simple, I could call central and periphery supports. And it does not have to be limited to just talk, but I wanted you to start off that talk is the absolute language. You remember what I was telling you, because you can do it in here to you, but there has to be the ability to talk. It is an absolutely necessary ingredient to all of the secondary relationships in life, all secondary activities, all weaker relationships. Language, the ability to talk, is an intricate and unavoidable part. But now behavior can also play a needed part as a kind of peripheral support to this. For instance, a secondary activity, a man's hobby, which is always a secondary activity, or is his attempted profession. A man decides, apparently, he wants to be a writer. Well, then just the flash of 2 or 3 rounds of thought patterns firing off. He can picture himself on all the talk shows, picture himself the literary line of New York, Paris, Hollywood, not only paying large sums for his latest book, but begging him, holding out fantastic sums to come out and at least oversee the general screenplay adaptation. All of this. Think the kind of women he used to see around at art galleries, a much better class of women than turns him down now. They seem to bathe regularly and get their hair done, and that they always seem to be attracted to a man who was a writer. And so the person thinks about it a few more minutes, and says, I like it, I think I'll do it. Let's see, now what do I need? Well, I got to write the book, but I've already had, all my life, I've had great ideas. I've had these weird ideas. I've had ideas. Sometimes I'll hear about a movie or I'll read a review of a book, and it's the same kind of thing I thought about years ago, and I just didn't get around. All right, so I'm going to do it now. I'm getting down to it. Let's see now. All right. So maybe he's looking through the paper, and he thinks, you know what I really need? So he really get down to work. I need me. Where's that ad I saw? And man finds a paper. It says, brand new, great major breakthrough of a word processor. It's only $1,750. And the guy thinks, that's what I need. So he goes out and he gets a new job. Takes a second job. Or he decides, well, in fact, there's not enough jobs here for me to get this money fast enough. I'm gonna move on. I think I'll move up to Philadelphia. And then I got to work real hard and save up and get that processed. And he tears that. I got to have that one because then, stand back, Hemingway. F. Scott. Because I can just see me. Maybe I'll stand up. Maybe I'll put on a table. Maybe I'll sit down and get me a big old easy chair. How much do they cost? Well, anyway, I need $1,750. Let's see. I'll get a job at McDonald's. Do you understand? He goes off now. Who don't work 6 months, a year, and all the time at McDonald's he can talk to people. But yes, the only reason I'm here is I'm saving up for a word processor model so-and-so, and I got the ad here. Because if I get that, then I'm going to knock out a novel that's a novel. I'm going to be somebody. Do you understand? This is not a criticism, not social commentary. This is the kind of thing that's necessary in life. How many writers do we need in life? Not your opinion, not my opinion. How many famous writers are there at any given time? How many books sell? Last time I heard there's something like, in America alone, I think it was, I shudder to remember, it seemed like it was 55,000 last year books were published. And how many make a profit in a year's time? 200? 300? How many people actually get famous out of 55,000 people that wrote a book and actually had somebody publish it? How many people get famous new each year? A dozen? You just got to face the fact. But how many people say they're a writer? Probably not as many of waiters in New York that say that they're actually actors. But it's probably not too far down the line. The number of people that are actually writers. And so, rather than there being a glut of actual writers, I mean, to me, 55,000 books a year is, I mean, nobody asked my opinion, that seems sufficient. just for one country. So, rather than my example of this guy making it 55,001, 56,000, he does what? He gets off into a peripheral support of his interest. His relationship to being a writer is very weak. If it was a strong relationship, I'm just going to make this up real fast, we read this kind of thing in life, it's very common to hear about a guy suddenly has a hit just out of nowhere. The book of the decade. Then you find out the guy maybe never wrote anything. It's very likely, or it's not uncommon that he never writes anything again. Or if he does, the second one makes some people go, Jesus, I wonder if he actually wrote the first one. It's a one-shot deal, and you may find out if life will make him speak in a certain way, he may say, well, it was one weekend. Well, it actually ran into Monday. I had to take the day off, and I just had a couple of legal pads, and I was doodling. I was at the beach house, and to tell you the truth, I wrote most of it from, I got there late Thursday. I took an early weekend, and I just fooled around, and tell you the truth, it just kind of came out and I wrote it. That is a strong relationship, that is the person to being a writer. In a sense, he had no choice, or she had no choice. Composers many times say that. All of you should have heard this or read this. Life even makes people admit this, ordinary people, that it was just them and it came out, even if you're not John Lee Hooker. That would be a strong relationship. That person right then would have been a writer, or for some length of time. That person was a writer. But that's not all that's possible. That's not all that's necessary for life's general welfare in a more complex movement of change. You've got people around pursuing things that the support of their relationship to this person saying, I'm a writer. Not published yet, but I am a writer. That's the reason I'm alive. I can tell that God's put it, my talent is in writing. That's where my future lies. Well, are you writing now? Have you written anything? No, what I'm doing now is setting up for that word processor, a model so-and-so here. That's what I need. Then I can get down to some serious writing. It's peripheral support of a weak relationship. The history of man, don't say replete, is replete. How about, it seems to be so important to humanity, the religious life, the worship. What do? Can you consider, as beautiful architecturally as they may be and artistically, to save money, to spend decades constructing an edifice, a building? So most of you are looking blank because you're so used to it, you think it's going somewhere else. That's it. If there was some kind of primary necessity for men to worship, that this was some kind of do or die, that men had to recognize there is some being, something outside the system that we have got to bow down to. You got to acknowledge you're better off for it. Maybe you don't have to. Maybe he'll let you slide until later on. He may catch up with you. But what we should be doing now is paying tribute while we can. So what's the first thing we should do? How should we worship? Well, by God, let's all pitch in and save up money and go beg and sell donuts. You know, we'll get us $50 million and we'll build this thing so that we can fall on our knees or put our head on the pavement or lean against a wall and go, and close your eyes, of course, and holler, oh, great God, in this $50 million structure. Oh. All hobbies, all entertainment is standing around in the slaughter queue. They can, anything that is not primary, anything that is not absolutely life-supporting at that moment for you, can be seen as being a kind of peripheral support of whatever you're doing, that you're never right down to doing it. Because if you are, there's almost no inclination, almost no time to talk about it. But you certainly would not fall into, well, no sarcastic laughter, but you certainly would not be falling into, I just know that if things are just right, my musical ability will finally show up if I just had that new keyboard, if I just had that gold-plated, diamond encrusted guitar. Yeah. That's what I need. That's what I need. Or even if I don't get a word processor, if I had a Mont Blanc, $150 pen so I could write. I don't need a word processor. Never mind that $17.50. If Fitzgerald or whoever it was used to stand up and write in longhand, it's good enough for me. But not a 10-cent pencil. God, if I just had one of those big old pens, $150, how will I get one? I'll have to save up. That is part of your relationship to being a writer, but it is a weak relationship. It requires peripheral behavior, if not talk. Something else. Let me pick up a little piece. A taping or two ago, you remember I pointed out that rather than feeling as though perhaps perhaps time in the past and memory was a fitting subject for ridicule, that you should feel a kind of sympathy for the past, because it was, as I so succinctly put it, in my humble opinion, that the past is a sitting duck, that you can do anything you want to with it. Update. Update. Do you realize that the past can use you as a punching bag? I can say a sitting duck, but I want you to understand I'm trying to show you that the past can do at least as much to you, and I'm inferring perhaps a little bit more, than you can do to it. It may be a sitting duck, but if that's true, and so are you. Rather than going into any great attempted exposition on that, let me at least point out to you that whenever you're dealing with 3D loops, then all things are possible. That is, I can start out in one night, I can point out to some degree or try to sketch and get some of you to see that yes, in a way, the past is just a sitting duck. It can be manhandled, mistreated. You know, obviously, people do it because you know everybody else does it to some degree, because you know that things that happen between you and somebody else, for instance, you remember what happened, you know, a few months, a year or so later, you ask them, and my God, are we talking about the same event? They have taken the past, as soon as you're brought up, and they go, oh yeah, I remember that. And you see the dastardly deed that they took their little intellectual paws and they went, and they just kind of, you know, pull the legs off of it and bend it around. They went, yeah, that's what happened. And you go, so the poor old past. All right. But now we've waited a few days. I don't have to point this out, do I? I mean, people are in hospitals. Life has people climbing the walls, and they claim, many of them, the past is driving me crazy. If I could just forget about it. I've tried analysis, I've tried drugs. Somebody do something. Give me that Phillips screwdriver treatment up in the nose. If I could just quit thinking about the way my mother abandoned me. Or if I could just quit thinking about the way my mother wouldn't abandon me. She just held over all these. The past is kicking you around like a used soccer ball. That's the way it seems. But the point that the one point I was going to at least hit on, that I was trying to round up for you, that which apparently are opposites, adversaries. So I can point out between state A and state B has been had. State B has been kicked around for 21 years, more or less, through this kind of misinformation. They've been made fools of. But I showed you, what if? I never did point this out back when I was talking about this, when I kept saying to you that consider that state B might come up and admit, well, by God, we've been had all these years, and we don't see any way to protect you by it. I didn't point this out. I knew I was forgetting something. What I was going to add to that was that they did that falsely. In other words, they weren't being sincere. They hadn't been fooled. I knew I forgot something. I'm glad I thought about that. So if one is true, the other can't be true. If state A has outfoxed state B, that's it. And state B admitted it. What else do you want? There's your proof, right? In a 3D loop, anything's possible. In a 3D loop, all things are possible, including the coeval potency partnership of two apparent adversaries, two opposites, two opposing energies. An opposing energy, and it's likewise a live, organic resistance. But all things are possible. Yes, I can see the poor old past. You can just use it as a punching bag. I'll change it. Yes, I can see the past treats us all like we are sitting ducks. We are plastic lawn ornaments to life. Right. We've about run out of tape. I had a few more things I will try and get you to see the connection next time we are taping, having to do with memory in the past. But another little thing, vis-a-vis my comments, every time I say I for you people, imagine I'm saying the comments that were made here. And I told you people a couple of nights ago, especially out there on tape, me saying I, just forget all that crap. I'm just doing it the fast way. It's not I, and it's not important. And don't keep thinking that you're hearing me say I. I'm not. It was mentioned here. You people heard certain comments about everything is silly. You people even heard the graduations of silliness. Of what people think, what people feel, the way they look, who they are. If any of you found that the word silly, if you found that to be maybe a little harsh, well, to say that everything and everybody is silly, and especially those that don't know it. I just wanted to say that if any of you, after some serious reflection on this matter, so you notice I didn't say that I reflected on it. If any of you find the word silly too strong, that's what I meant to say. That's what was meant to be said. You may temporarily feel quite free. Temporarily. I want you to work your way up to silly. But you may for now substitute the word, it's operational. Use the word cute. All right, all of you who laughed in the way I heard, you can bypass that and go back to silly. But those of you sitting out there that I see, and I know who you are, that did not laugh, and especially those of you going, perhaps you had better work up and start with cute. But just see serious people in person, on TV. At least on TV they can't sweat on you or spit on you. But to see people, politicians, economists, weather forecasters, astrologers, preachers, to see people making serious statements, I'm talking about serious, that there is no doubt, there's been some debate, so I hear, questioning the validity of the findings having to do with the growing greenhouse effect, that we've probably gone too far down the road now. And they say it and they make the statement, and then the camera sweeps around, and there are other scientists sitting there, other intelligent people going, gee. If you must, work it up this way, look at me and just think, because it's true, think, well, how cute. Everyone who believes that life is going downhill, even those who believe it's going sideways, everyone who is serious is cute. Anyone who has a mirror in your home, I don't know why you would, but anytime you feel serious, even if you can't get the mirror, trust me, you're cute. You're cute. I'm not, see? No sarcasm. You're cute. Anyone who's serious is cute. And the more serious they are, the less likelihood at all that they have any sensation of their seriousness, the cuter they are. But see, in the city, people take it as being frightening. They call people like that fanatics, one-minded, limited vision. They're cute. It's cute, once you can see it, that life can continue to do this and everybody falls for it. It's cute. It's silly, but if you got to work your way up, it's cute. Try that for a while, trust me. Try cute, and you'll become accustomed to that, and you'll begin to recognize that all this is cute. All the dangers, all the threats, and then they'll suddenly hit you one day. That's right, all the seriousness. It's cute. Then you can move on and realize it's silly. Let me leave with a thought for the night. You should be pleased to persevere. I'm talking to you people. Talking to some of you individually. All right, I'm talking to all of you individually. You should be pleased to persevere. Semicolon. All right. Happy not to give up or give in.